Requesting connection. Established. Encrypted. We're live. The show you've been asking for. Advice, technology, and community. Linux first, all others second. This is Ask Noah.
Live from Altispeed Technologies, the Ask Noah show starts right now. This is the show where we came to do all the things on Linux they said couldn't be done and take your questions on how to do the same. The phone lines are open this hour to be a part of the program. It is a free call, 1-855-450-NOAH. That's 1-855-450-6624, or send an email to live@asknoahshow.com. My name is Noah Chalaya. I am your host. Delighted to be here with you. And another episode of the Ask Noah show kicks off this hour. Joining me, my co-host, Mr. Steve Ovens. Welcome in, sir.
I'm going to throw a curveball at you in this introduction. How about that?
Ball me.
So I've been considering recently how whenever we try to improve something because the original wasn't good for us or had some sort of downside, we often end up in a situation where 10 years down the line, it turns out that our substitution was probably not as good. You know what I'm talking about?
Okay. Yeah, sure.
So I'm thinking about like food additives or like sugar supplements and stuff like that. And I'm sitting here looking at this. I went and got a Zevia, so it doesn't really matter. This is not a brand thing, but it's meant for like to replace like a soda, a pop, whatever you want to call it. But stevia is a natural sugar replacement, and so like all of these diet stuff, they tend to be really bad for you in one way or another. Like there've been studies about how aspartame and several others actually impact cognitive decline as you get into your 60s and 70s and all that sort of stuff.
Sure.
And I was thinking about this because one of the things that we often talk about in the show is that a theme of how things are changing in the world around us and how we're making decisions because like we either have changed architectures because there was baggage in the old one, or we make a different technology change because we think it's going to be better. So I look at things like Rust and the hotness around moving to Rust because it's memory safe and all that sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder, in 10 years' time, are we going to look back at this stuff and think, maybe we should have just put a little more effort into fixing the thing that was well known that had a well-defined scope? Or was it actually the right decision? Because sometimes it actually is legitimate to cut the cruft out. But sometimes when you start that new project in order to scratch that itch, you just created a whole bunch more work for yourself and you cut out a bunch of the functionality in order for you to do that. And so I just was mulling that over, and I was thinking, have you ever done that, Noah? Have you ever started something over, started fresh, and then been really happy with it until you took an objective look at it and thought, maybe that wasn't the right idea?
All the time. Here's the thing. Oftentimes what I find myself doing these days, it's so timely you ask this question. Often what I find myself, there's a quote from a NASA engineer. He works at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, JPL, and basically they were asking him about the design of a spaceship. And it's one of those things where you don't get a do-over, right? You get to do it one time and you got to get it right. And so they were building. I've been following pretty closely the missions to Mars. And early on, for those that don't know, early on when NASA tried to do this, the spaceships burned up, and when they went and looked at it, long story short, they were using metric and they should have been using American. Long story, but it's a huge blunder for NASA, and it was super embarrassing and all the rest of it. And so they're talking with this NASA engineer, and this is maybe 20, well, actually it was right during the pandemic, because there's a side story that we're not going to get into, but 2020, they're ready to launch this next phase of these moon rovers, and it's this big deal because they're looking for this window and all of these things. And so they're talking to this engineer, and they ask him, what is the secret to a good design? What's the secret when you're designing something, when like this is the thing that I've landed on and it's the right design for forever because it's going to Mars and you don't get to bring it home and fix it or do it again? And his answer has stuck with me because it resonated so strongly with me. And he said, complicated designs are typically the result of a good design that hasn't yet had enough time to distill it down into something elegant. And he basically went on to elaborate that when you are designing a thing, or when you're trying to reinvent the wheel, so to speak, every time you do that, the design should be getting simpler. It should be getting simpler. It should be getting less complex, because that is a good idea, distilling down into something simple and elegant. If you start to bolt things on, if it starts to add complication, if it starts to get, out of control and hairy and those sorts of things, to your point, Steve, where you start looking down the road and you're like, wait a minute, how did I ever get here? I had it there and now I'm here and this is way worse than it was over there. You know what I mean? If you ever get to that point, that's either one of two things is happening. Either it's not really that great of an idea and you really need to go back to the drawing board and you need to settle on a new idea that can distill into something elegant, or it hasn't been yet given enough time. It's a great concept. It's a great thing. Now it needs to distill down. And so the most recent example I have of this, Steve, Home Assistant. Home Assistant is one of those things that, as I've said many times on the show, it never started out as you started from the ground up. You're like, I'm going to centralize my house on this thing. And then you put it in and then you kind of built out, right? And so you knew what you were doing from day one, and just have kind of grown the thing organically, almost like planting a seed and watching a tree grow. In fact, it's so funny. I have pictures of this. I literally took a Raspberry Pi, and I don't mean a Raspberry Pi in a case with a power supply in it. I literally took a Raspberry Pi and plugged it into one of those little 6-inch Ethernet cords or 3-inch Ethernet cords and stuck it into a switch and threw an SD card in and went, there, that'll do it. And that's what ran Home Assistant for years in my house. And didn't really expect it to stick, didn't really expect it to be something that I was really going to get super into. Thought I had different ideas about home automation, and I was wrong. It turned into this thing that, like, now I can't imagine living without it. And so as I've gone through and been very critical of, like, well, what are the things? So my automation experience coming from everything from Crestron and Lutron and some of those things. What are the things that are good about those systems? What are the things I like? And how could I achieve the same result with Home Assistant? I've kind of taken a from the ground up approach. And so I've looked at things like, okay, what do I use for enclosures? Where do I get a steel enclosure? Who builds that? And there's actually a company called LifePro that will build you these enclosures. And they have a bunch of different models, different sizes, all those sorts of things. And then there are DIN rails. And then I started looking through, well, who makes DIN rails for Raspberry Pi? And turns out that lots of people do. And so you can get DIN rails with PoE hats. And then I started looking at, how do you provide reliable power? If there is one Achilles heel to Raspberry Pis, it is the power supply. You got to have the right power supply. And so I looked into, Cisco makes a little catalyst switch that it provides PoE and also has the ability to take a 12-volt backup power, and so it's and is DIN mountable. So I've got a DIN enclosure. I've got Raspberry Pis mounted in DINs. I've got this little catalyst switch. Just so happens, nice little side effect, because they've been on the market for years, and because they're primarily used in industrial appliances, they're available for like a dime a dozen on eBay, and so it's not a particularly expensive thing. So it's a quality switch, and I don't really care about throughput, right? That doesn't really matter. Gig is more than enough, and for what I'm doing, and I don't need a gajillion ports because it's really just powering the little devices that are in this enclosure. I know this isn't a thing for you, but for me, Orbit panels are a huge part of automation. And so there's another Pi that goes in there, another DIN rail, and that's running Companion. And then another one that's in there, and that's running Volumio. And I kind of assembled all that, and then I kind of stood back and I looked at it and I went, okay, now how do I feel about this and how does that compare? And so when I was really honest with myself and did a side by side, all of the arguments that I could make for like the Lutron thing, I go, well, it has a dedicated controller. Well, what is a dedicated controller? It's a dedicated piece of hardware that has some custom software on it. There. I've now built a dedicated controller with a custom piece of software on it. Ta-da! And then, okay, well, it's got a dedicated radio. And so started looking into who makes dedicated Zigbee Z-Wave radios. And it turns out there's a company that builds a PoE a PoE, Zigbee, Z-Wave radio, so I can the exact same thing that you would get from like a Crestron or a Lutron system, where you can say, here's where the wireless devices are going, and I want dedicated radio units that are going to be within range, so that all of those things are going to work, and all of that wiring comes back to one central place, and all of those things are PoE powered, but that PoE powered comes from a switch, and that switch has a backup battery that goes directly to the switch, completely separated from the rest of the network, so it's not being treated as a network thing. It's not being treated as it's an appliance. It's an appliance that's built into a steel box, and I've started to do that. And what I found is, back to that NASA quote, what I found is a much simpler design. Instead of a Companion running on a vhost and Home Assistant running on a Raspberry Pi hanging out of a switch, and Volumio, I think that did have a case, so that's maybe one step above, but it started its life literally double-sided taped to an amplifier. And all these different things in all these different ways are all like neatly now in DIN rails and mounted in one place with intention, with purpose, specific models, and then I've duplicated that. So the plan, now this is more aspirational than realistic, so don't judge me, but the plan is, when I go to do software updates, I'm going to, where I haven't gotten myself into trouble with Home Assistant, I have gotten myself into trouble with Companion, because you got to update Companion Satellite that's running on all the keypads at the same time that you update Companion, the server software. And so from my perspective, I have 4 things that have to be updated: Volumio, Home Assistant, BitFocus, BitFocus Companion, BitFocus Companion Satellite. All those 4 things have to be upgraded. So now I can do a staging approach where once a year or twice a year, whatever it is I decide, do it in the identical thing that I built, minus the enclosure, minus the PoE switch, but build that and try it. Does everything work? Yep, it all works. Okay, now I'm going to go do the updates over on this thing. And what I'm finding is it makes things much easier. Whereas before I was doing things like, I'll take a network run from over here and I'll take that run from over there. And no, now all the automation has their own dedicated network runs that all come back to a dedicated box. So so to your point, or to put a bow on it, yes, I've circled back and said, how did I get into this mess? How did I get this hairball? I have tried to employ that NASA approach of, okay, it's gotten that way because it wasn't an elegant idea, because I didn't give it time to distill down, because I haven't put enough thought, energy, and effort into distilling it down into something simple. Is that a helpful response to your question?
I think that is a longer explanation than I expected, but typical Noah fashion.
Yeah, that's right. Don't tempt me with a good time. Feedback. Our first email comes in from Kristen. Christian says, "Dear Noah and Steve, I've been listening to your show going on a few years now. Some of your content is way above my head, but I always enjoy the spirit. I'm a hobbyist and I work outside of IT, but I like to tinker, and I think the fight for open source easily dwarfs the fight for other human rights. The problem. I've been running Home Assistant on a Raspberry Pi for a few years now. It's only on my home network, and I don't have a static IP address. Neither do I want to expose my home network to the outside world. Accessing Home Assistant, however, is a must. Among other things, my wife. My wife and I keep our shopping lists on it, and I've been subscribed to the official cloud service for some years now. I think it's time to fund other projects. I've used Tailscale on your recommendation, but I find that my Android and iOS devices tends to interfere with the internet connection, even if I'm not using Tailscale DNS. I've also tried using DuckDNS, but with mixed results. I own my own VPS with the domain, and I've read about using it as a WireGuard tunnel to my Raspberry Pi, but it seems rather convoluted to a muggler like myself. What are your thoughts on the matter? Should I bite the bullet and keep up the sub? I think a lot of projects deserve to get paid, and loads of other projects have just as much utility as Home Assistant, Image, LibreOffice, NewPipe, etc. So the money wouldn't just go into my savings account. Is there a way to fix it so that Tailscale doesn't interfere with the internet? Thanks in advance. I love what you do for the community." So Steve, let's start with this. What do you do in your house? How do you remotely access Home Assistant?
From my phone, if I'm out and I actually have my phone, I have Tailscale. Tailscale runs all the time for me. It doesn't matter what network I'm on. And I run an exit. So I run them as exit nodes so that I'm not... Okay, let's back up. In Tailscale, there's a couple of different modes that you can do. One is not in exit mode. And when you don't have an exit node, what happens is it tries to do split DNS and only access the things that are on Tailscale, the tailnet, via the Tailscale pathing. You follow me so far?
Mm-hmm.
When you have an exit node, what it means is actually tunnel all of my traffic through that node so that it's as if I'm on the LAN, so that I can access, let's say, I don't know, audio bookshelf that may not have a Tailscale client on it. And so what this means is Tailscale can act like an overarching VPN where all of your traffic goes through that tunnel, or it can just be used to access things that have the Tailscale client on them.
Uh-huh.
I use with an exit node so that all of my traffic is always coming from my house, partly so that I have access to all of the different services that I run in my house without having to have everything on my tailnet, and partly because I use it as a replacement for a VPN.
Okay.
So that's what I do. And then I have two different machines on my network that have the Tailscale exit node configuration. And that's more for my wife than it is for myself. So I run GrapheneOS, and by and large, I don't have any problem. I leave Tailscale on all the time, and I would 100% know if I wasn't getting messages via, Telegram or whatever, because that connects to the internet. My wife, on the other hand, she has an iPhone, and from time to time, she'll be like, yeah, Tailscale's not working. And the solution is for her to change from one exit node to the other. And I don't know why that works, because they both work for me just fine. And I very, very, very rarely change my exit node from one to the other. So that's what I do. On my desktop, I also have, like on my laptop and stuff, I also carry the OpenVPN config around. And partly that's because it depends on where you are in the world and which route is faster. There are times where using the tailnet is significantly slower, and there are times where OpenVPN is significantly slower. What do you do?
So I'm the worst possible person to ask that to. I'll answer your question in the interest of transparency. The short answer is I don't. The longer answer is I don't know if I just woke up one day and decided I was going to be a masochist or what. But I'm going to wind up, Steve, and it's going to be ironic because I made my entire living, my whole life, I made a living working on the forefront of technology, and I feel like I'm going to get to my 50s or 60s, and I am going to go retire in some small town in North Dakota that you've never heard of, in a cabin in the woods that's completely disconnected from society. As part of my preparation for my departure from society, I have started to look at, like, what does it look like if I have to be very intentional about where my internet is going, right? So one of the things that, this is no choice of mine, it was cast upon me. Many different services now want to pay attention to where you're connecting from, and they want to memorize that location. And I object to that. So if you're going to choose, or if I have to choose a public point of presence that NOAA is going to emanate from, I'm going to pick that endpoint very carefully. So I chose to pick that endpoint out of a data center from AirVPN. AirVPN, if you're not familiar, is a VPN for the nerdiest of nerds. It's run by a group of people that want to keep the internet open and private, and they do all the things that you would expect from a VPN provider by way of they don't have logs and they don't have the things or whatever, but it's run by a bunch of nerds. And so I picked a data center location, and I said, from here on out, this is where NOAA Chilai exists. So banking thing, and I was actually really impressed with my bank. They were super good to me and said, yeah, no problem. Well, that's weird that this is always coming from this thing. And do you use a VPN? I do. Okay. And then they just like, all right, cool. You can connect from there. And it's been good ever since. But all that to say, I have since gone through and I double natted myself intentionally. So cable modem comes in and it goes to an OpenWRT router. That OpenWRT router has a persistent VPN connection out to AirVPN in a data center in California. And then my entire home network sits as a client, a IPv4, what am I trying to say? Natted client to that OpenWRT router. So it goes, so the path from my network, Home Assistant goes to it's what I'm going to call my home router. It goes to what I'm going to call my ISP router or my WAN router. And that then gets tunneled. All the traffic gets tunneled to California and then goes to the internet. Long way of answering your question. I can't VPN back in the other way. Like I can't host services inside of my house and get into my house. It doesn't work that way. Everything has to require double port forwarding and all the things from, and I can't do, from California anyway. So I don't have remote access to my house. When I did, which wasn't all that long ago, maybe a year or so ago, I was still using OpenVPN because I didn't mind connecting. What I would do if I woke up in Christian's shoes is I would keep paying Nebuchadnezzar. I would, just to continue to support the development of them. Then, if I decided I wanted to take on an additional challenge, or I didn't like the fact that I didn't want to use the VPN connection, or more realistically, I wound up in your boat, Steve, where I want to have access to more things in my house than just Home Assistant, then I would go through the hassle of figuring out why Tailscale doesn't work and all of that. The other thing I will throw out there, I don't know how hard I would fight to use Tailscale. I think I would spend my time dialing in WireGuard for 3 reasons. 1, WireGuard is not that hard to set up. It's literally 5 lines in a text file. You generate a pair of keys. It's about 5 lines in each text file, and you're off to the races. And really from there, it's deciding how you want to set up routing. Do you want them all to go to one central point? Do you want them to do round robin? Do you want, figure that out. Decide for yourself what you want to do. But it's not that hard. It's increasingly being built into stuff. So if you're using OpenSense, it's built into OpenSense. You're using OpenWRT, it's built into OpenWRT. Using Android, it's built into Android. So they're all of these different things have the ability to do that. And in the end, it's what's powering Tailscale anyway. So I think if it were me, that's what I would do. What do you think of that answer?
I think that we choose our complexities in a polar opposite way. You're like, I'm going to make it so asinine to get into my network that people are just going to give up and it's also going to cause me a big headache. But if I ever did want to get into my network, I'd take the most manual way possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So funny story, the straw that broke the camel's back, again, part of it was all these places want to geo-identify me and all that nonsense. So all that was definitely riding in and it played a role. But the straw that broke the camel's back, this is the part you'll agree with, Steve. The straw that broke the camel's back is I could not get YouTube out of my house. I could not do it. I admit failure. I cried uncle. Google has to be one of the most challenging things on planet Earth to block. Now, I know this isn't a popular stance to take, but I haven't traded in my parent card. So when I say we're not doing this thing, then there are going to be consequences when I find out that we're doing this thing. And so I sought to draw a banhammer when it comes to all Google's stuff. And one of the easiest ways that I could think to do that was to handicap my own internet. And so the best speed I get is maybe 7 down, because the entire thing's getting tunneled over a VPN on the other side of the country. The best speed I'm getting is like 7 megs down, 2-3 megs up. It is more than enough for me to check my bank account, do show prep in the morning, check my email. All the things that I need to do work just fine. You know who it drives nuts? All of my kids who are constantly prompted for sign-in things for Google or YouTube or anything else, because it looks and goes, you're coming in with, thousands of other people in this data center. That's weird. We need you to sign in, right? And it shut all that down. And so it has reduced our reliance on the internet, which I think is a good thing. It has reduced, or entirely eliminated social media or the connection there within, which I think is a good thing. And it has allowed me to weed out the companies that I want to do business with. The place like my bank, who's like, this is super weird that you're connecting from a VPN. I'm like, yeah, that's awesome. The companies that are like, oh, this is weird and you can't connect, or we're not going to allow you to do this, right? Awesome, sayonara. And I don't work with those places anymore. And good luck tracking me, because everything comes through a VPN and goes through a thing, and there's a kill switch in OpenWRT, so it just internet traffic does not leave my house unless it's going to that place. So yeah, I don't necessarily disagree with you. Here's the to put a bow on it though, or to bring it back around when you talk about complexity. So my son comes to me and he said, "This is a right hand to God. This is a true conversation." He comes to me and he says to me, "I want to be able to YouTube DL videos, and do you care if I put a Raspberry Pi in my locker at school and YTDLP them down and then copy them back over?" I'm like, "No, I don't really care. Just you be prepared to have that conversation with your teacher when they ask you why there's a little, pocket battery and a Raspberry Pi and, a little external hard drive sitting in your locker." And so he asked me, and I gave him permission to set up WireGuard on a VPS, and his Pi calls out to that VPS, and he's got a computer at home that calls out to that VPS, and he created himself a little WireGuard network, and that's how he moves YouTube videos from his school locker back into our house. And so, and the thing I'm okay with is it's the school's internet that is being used to get the YouTube videos. He's going through the technical challenge of setting WireGuard up. But I guess my point is, if a 14-year-old can do this to get YouTube videos, anybody listening to the show has the ability to do. It's just not that hard. So I don't know that I agree that it's a tremendously complex way to do it. I think it's actually pretty straightforward and simple. It is true that it's not you have to look up the config file or whatever, I suppose, the first time. But there's even generators for that if you didn't want to do it.
I didn't say it was overly complex. I just said that you took it the most asinine way that you could.
That's probably fair. Dominic writes in and he says, "Hi, Noah and Steve. I asked earlier about phone backup on GrapheneOS. You mentioned Seed Vault. I tried it. I had about 130 apps moving from my Pixel 6 to my Pixel 7. Here's what I found." So before we get on to that, hey, Steve, I counted. I have 25 apps on my phone. How about you?
I didn't count ahead of time, but let's see. You keep going, and I'll give you an answer.
I'm guessing. My money is on south of 130. Let's just say that. The good. Almost all the apps got installed again. Apps know which store they came from. The home screen wallpaper and the icon lamp was restored. About a third of the apps, and interestingly, all the Microsoft apps allowed backup of and restore of their data, not just the app itself. The bad. App permissions are gone. Secondly, the accounts in the Android account manager are not backed up. Third, Seed Vault reported that 5 apps couldn't be backed up. Some apps offer file-based backup, but it has to be enabled manually in the app settings first. The ugly. None of my 12 banking apps or trading apps allowed backup or restore of their data, and 3 apps were broken after the restore. So, and then he goes on to say, my conclusion, Seed Vault is not a full backup solution. It's a good starting point for me. It's a backup strategy. You need a password manager because many apps require a login. Seed Vault data plus documents and photos should be backed up to remote storage, such as an NAS. Combination of sync thing and folder works well for me. Thanks again. Regards from Germany, Dominic. So here's what I tell you. I'm going to work backwards through your email. I would tell you that the three broken apps that didn't work after restore, I agree that's a bummer. The 12 banking apps or trading apps that didn't restore data, Steve, I am kind of looking at that and saying that sounds an awful lot like a security feature and less like an ugly side effect of Seed Vault not doing its job. Agree or disagree?
Yeah, I wouldn't want any of. I do not want the possibility of like a session hijack, cookie transfer, or any of those related things to affect my bank. In fact, like you, my bank is ridiculously hard to use because I don't allow it to, when you sign in, it's like, would you like to store this device? I'm always clicking no. Mm-hmm. The timeout is set as low as I can, even though that causes me some level of pain. But all of these things are set as best that I can so that if someone does try to like hijack my browser session or whatever, like steal the browser session, it's probably going to time out before you get there. And so I would treat this, first of all, I'm not the person to ask about this. I fully recognize the fact that I kind of boggled at the fact that we've got 130 apps and 12 of them are financial related. And I just went, that is not me. Like I have zero financial, unless you consider like Delta a financial app because you can spend money in it. But I have 0 on that on my phone. I do not trust my phone. It just seems like I know. I'm the weird one. I get it.
Here's the thing. You've never heard me say I think you're weird. In fact, you have, if anything, you have seen me try to imitate more, become more like you and less like me in that regard.
So at any rate, yeah, I sympathize from the perspective of I have a device, whether it's a computer or otherwise. I want a backup thing, and I want to be able to restore it to something else in the case of disaster recovery or whatever, and not everything happens. I completely sympathize with that, regardless of whether I agree with the choice of using a phone or not. I would say I very, very much appreciated this feedback email, right? For me, it was concise. I got a good snapshot of things that worked, that didn't work, and it was a direct follow-up on something that I had read about but had no real experience with. So from that perspective, I am very grateful that Dominic sent this back in.
Yeah, 100%. So let's work through this. So, okay, so 12-bit trading apps, you and I would say that's a security feature. App permissions are gone. Again, I don't know. I struggle with that one too. To some degree, I would say if they could be backed up and restored, perfectly fine. If not, removing them all and making you re-authenticate things is maybe not the end of the world. I can kind of understand how GrapheneOS would say, if something just shows up, I don't just take your word that it's supposed to have permission to this thing. No, it's a new phone. You're going to have to tell me you want this thing to get there. About a third of the apps increasing Microsoft backup and restore, home screen roles. Okay. So, yeah, I mean, I'm glad there is an option for people. I'm not, I would suggest a bit of leniency on some of those things. It sounds like there might be some security stuff involved there. But I appreciate you. I, like Steve, appreciate you writing back in and sharing with us, because this gives us some kind of real world data to go off of. Charlie writes in and says, "Good day, everyone." Now, truth be told, we summarized Charlie's email because there was a lot here. We appreciate all the detail, but we tried to get it down to a summary that will read well on air. I recently bought a secondhand car and is diving into the self-hosted vehicle tech. On the dash cam front, open source options are slim. A couple of Pi-based project exists, but haven't really taken off. The most practical option right now seems to be VioFocams. They work over HTTP without a forced app or mandatory cloud connection. It's a nice privacy win. They're also looking at Tracker. It's a self-hosted GPS tracking solution. You'd need a VPS, a hardware GPS device, a mobile data plan. But the Freematics one runs about $129 and is worth a look. They're also curious whether anybody has any experience with LoRa-based GPS trackers as a backup, given LoRa's 4 to 5 kilometer range that could cover dead zones. As a bonus, the previous owner wired in a 3.5 millimeter lapel mic integrated with the car stereo over Bluetooth. No external hands-free kit needed. So the questions to the audience: is anybody experienced with self-hosted GPS tracking, and what other cool tech would you add to a vehicle? So Steve, I know I don't think you're much of a vehicle modder per se, but if you were to build a vehicle and you were going to build the tech in your vehicle like you build it in your house, where would you start? What would you do?
That's a tough one. I can understand the need for dash cams from all kinds of perspectives. Just like, first of all, the data, that'd be neat. Having the ability to see the sunset or go back and see some of the sites, that would also be neat. Not to mention the protective aspect of, like, if you got in an accident or whatever, knowing what happened. So I could see that. One of the things I'd kind of kicked around is having something that plugs in via the USB, so it comes on when the car comes on and does whatever it needs to do. And I thought that would be an interesting way to do things like automatically open your garage door. So if it's on and it connects to the Wi-Fi, your access point, then you're close enough for it and it should open the door. And as soon as the truck goes off, it would disconnect from the Wi-Fi and the door would shut. So I've kind of kicked those sort of ideas around. I do like the idea of a self-hosted GPS tracking solution, just to be able to go back and see what you've done. initially that had never really appealed to me until I saw like kind of a heat map from NT and other places do this, like Image does this too, where there's a map of where all your photos kind of get taken. And that's kind of neat. I don't know. What would you do?
So this is not an area of expertise for me. Here's the other thing I would tell you. At least in the United States, they passed, as part of the infrastructure bill, things that mandate a connection back to the manufacturer. So that's becoming increasingly popular. And if I'm just be blunt and honest with you, I will likely never buy a brand new car. Nothing about this, everything is a menu and everything's a touch screen and all the boops and gadgets and bobs and things. And I had a friend, he bought right-handed guy, this true story, bought a brand new truck. And he's a GM technician. So this is particularly egregious. He buys a truck and didn't order it with a bed light and decides later he wants a bed light. So he buys the bed light and goes to wire it up, and the wiring is there and the switch is there in the cab, but he goes to turn it on and it doesn't fire up. Calls there. They have a little line that they can call to ask for guidance or whatever. And they're like, oh yeah, the VIN number for that truck wasn't programmed with a bed light. So it's $200 and then we can reprogram it for you. And then we'll send you a new programming file. And then the computer will allow you to turn that, and I'm like, for a light, for a 12-volt light. Going back to the beginning of the show, remember that time where we just had two little wires and you flipped a button and it sent 12 volts to the light and the little light bulb got all bright and flashy? That was the better way to do it. This stupid, enroll the MAC address of this thing so that it has permission to turn on or not. It's just, I don't know. Don't like it. Don't care for it. So all that to say, I'm going the other direction. I'm trying to take stuff out of my car, not put stuff in. However, I am familiar with really only one other thing that I didn't see mentioned here. And it is called, I believe it's called OpenPilot, and it's open source driver assistance. So what it's designed for is to be able to plug into like the automated cruise control and automatic lane centering and that sort of deal, and then give you like hands-free driving. What I think it could be potentially useful to you for is because it has, it has like a little screen and it's got little interfaces to connect to stuff, and the entire thing is open source. And so they have it's got like a little camera, and it's got a little screen, and it's got their little controller and all those sorts of things, and the whole thing is open source. And they have like a little rearview mirror that has a little screen built into it, and so that may be of use to you by way of figuring out like what you can connect, or could you steal some stuff off of it, or could you I don't know, those sorts of things. That's about the only real thing I could add to that. Past that, what I'm doing in my own vehicles, I just built myself a little wood box that goes over the little center console, and I am trying to mount stuff in there, and it's not far enough along that I feel comfortable saying like, oh, I've cracked this nut. It's just something I'm kind of playing with. But basically for me, what I'm looking for is GPS and music. I don't know that I really, could be potentially helpful, I guess, to have a camera or a dash cam. And as far as hands-free kit, I'm again trying to move to the direction of when I'm in my car, I'm driving a car, I'm not on a phone. So you'll have to wait, and I'll get to you when I get to you. Anything else? I think that pretty much covers it.
I'm tapped.
From the Linux Newswire newsroom, this is the Week in Review with JT.
For the week of May 3rd, 2026, here's the Linux and open source news. Curl 8.20 is out. QBitTorrent 5.2 has been released. Calibre 9.8 is out. The video editor Shotcut 26.4 is out, and the video editor Kdenlive 26.04 has also been released. In distro news, EasyOS 7.3 is now available, 4MLinux 51.1 is out, Xtix 26.5 has been released, the Endeavor OS team has announced the release of Titan Neo, GRML 2026.04 is out, Linux Mint 22.3 is now available, GrapheneOS 2026.05 has been released, and a newly released PS5 mod installs Linux and turns the PS5 into a Steam machine. In open source security news, copyfail is a vulnerability that was announced recently, which allows root on every major distribution with a simple Python script. Distros have been updated, so make sure you update your system soon. In open source AI news, Ubuntu will get what they call thoughtful AI integration in upcoming releases as an opt-in feature. Meta abandons its open source Llama for its proprietary Muse Spark. Cisco has announced a Python toolkit and command line interface to discover where a model has come from. It can determine whether two models share a common origin by analyzing architecture, metadata, tokenizer structure, and the learned weights themselves, using a tiered strategy that starts with fast structural checks and progresses to deeper weight level analysis when metadata alone is inconclusive. And lastly, Microsoft has finally open sourced DOS 1.0.
So, Steve, you're perusing, what did you call it? You called it SREing your house?
Something like that.
Oh my gosh, you're funny. So here's the thing: to a degree, you are a professional. You do
to a degree. I'm only a professional to a degree.
Well, no. You're a professional. Full stop. To a degree, you are a professional, and you can't shut it off, right? Like it would be perfectly reasonable if you said, "Listen, the shoemaker's kids has no shoes. I do SRE all day long for companies that you have any idea the value of the work that I do." I'm not doing it while I'm here. I brought a paycheck home. I put food on the table. There, now we're going to live like normal people. That would be perfectly reasonable. So to a degree, I think that you choose not to shut that off, that you bring that skill set home and choose to leverage it. Is that a fair summation of your skills and your choices?
I mean, I feel pretty guilty if something went down and I do this for a living and it goes down at my house. So...
yeah, I don't know. We'll have to agree to disagree. My printer breaks at times, and I'm like, yeah, you know what? Fix 3 of those today. That's going to wait. You're a better man than I guess. So
I didn't say it wouldn't wait. I just said
you'd feel bad.
I feel bad about it.
Well, that's good. So you're SREing your house, and you get, first of all, what is SRE?
Site reliability engineering.
Okay, so you go through and you look at it and you say, here's how to make all the things. Here's how to make all the blinky lights keep blinking. And you get to the end of it, and all of a sudden, you start getting alerts that your desktop is filling up. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so I mean, I set this up quite a long time ago to look for disk space problems in my environment, and as part of that, I don't know. I do a lot of deving on my machine and trying out new things and whatever. My Git projects directory is 130 gigs in size, so fairly chunky, and I got an alert saying that my desktop was 87% full, and I went, holy smokes, where is that all going? Because I have quite a bit of disk in my desktop in particular. So I ran a DU, and normally my process is run a DU, jump into the directory, run a DU, and so on. And I'm familiar with tools like NCDU and other types of utilities, but I went looking for something a little bit different, and I came across it's called QDirstat, and I'm sure that there are other people out there that have picked their favorite tool or that have come across this before, but to me it was relatively new. What I like about this, first of all, it's a quasi file browser as well as a utility to tell where your space is going. It is multi-threaded, and I really like that. You can actually watch it and see how many read operations it's got going on in a given directory as it's trying to traverse that. And ultimately, like most tools in this, it stack ranks your directories based on the highest used first. And then at the bottom third of the screen, there's like a little heat map, and it's neat. You can click on the heat map and it'll jump you to that file that is creating that heat map size. But what I really liked about it was because it's a quasi file browser, you can go in and just delete things right from that spot. And so I found that very useful. It has a pretty good right-click memory menu. So it's things like if you right-click on it, if you're using GCC or some form of make, it will run a make clean for you right from the menu. It's the same thing with Git. If your Git is getting too large, it has a Git clean right from there. It has an option called delete junk files. I have no idea what that does. I just thought that was neat. And so at any rate, I found this really useful for quickly interrogating where all the space was going. It covers hidden directories and all that kind of good stuff. So just wanted to give it a shout out. Thought this was neat. Thought I'd pass it along.
I love it. 1-855-450-NOAH, 855-450-6624. The email, live@asknoahshow.com. We'll have links for you in the show notes, podcast.asknoahshow.com. So New York has proposed in their 2026-2027 budget currently, it includes provisions that will require all 3D printers sold in the state to run what they're calling print blocking sensorware software. It surveils every part of the print for forbidden designs. And the policy would create felony charges for anybody possessing or sharing certain design files. The vote on the state budget could happen as early as a few weeks. So New Yorkers need to act fast to get this to scrap this from their budget. So I'll spare you all of the legal jargon, but here's the technical aspect of it that I think is worth drawing some attention to. So the first thing is that they are wanting to ban certain designs, certain 3D printed designs. Doesn't really matter what it is. The point is, from a technical standpoint, there's only a handful of ways to do this. So what they would like is, when you click print on a 3D printer, for the printer to look and say, nope, that's not on the approved list, I'm not going to print it. The problem that they face is 3D printers are really not very smart. They're really just dumb glue guns that follow an XYZ pattern. And so it doesn't really know what it's doing. It's just told, send the glue gun to here, squirt some glue out. Okay, now move over here, squirt some glue out. And instead of glue, it's melted plastic. But essentially, that's all it's doing. And so it has no idea what the full scope of the design is. And also, because they're just dumb glue guns on like a CNC thing, it doesn't really have the computing power to do what these legislators are asking this thing to do. So here's what our illustrious leaders have come up with, Steve. One idea is cryptographically signing prints. So the slicer evaluates either approved or unapproved, and then cryptographically signs the print and then sends it to the printer. The second thing that they've come up with is, well, we'll just connect the 3D printer to the internet, and yeah, the computing power on board the 3D printer may not have the ability to do it, but it can communicate up to the cloud to cloud, and it'll send the designs up there, and then we'll look at it and see if it's approved or not. If it is, then we'll allow it to print. If not, then we give them a scary message and tell them to go away. What do you think about the technical aspect of being able to do this? If somebody came to you and said, Mr. Evans, as an architect, I want to know how we stop people from using software maliciously. So I want to stop people from being able to print things. So we're going to take a printer that was designed for tinkers and we're going to stop from tinkering. Does the idea hold water?
Way to set that up. I mean, I think that the way that you set that up is a perfect no from me. I think that it would be extremely challenging to take a community that really likes to pull things apart, get down and basically the maker community, and then somehow figure out how to restrict them in a way that they can't get around it. I think that cat's out of the bag already. I think that it might function for 80% of the population because most of the people want like an easy button. The computer should just do a thing. That's part of the reason why AI has taken off. Not to make this an AI discussion, but AI is really taken off in the normie world because they just want to tell the computer to do a thing and have the computer do a thing instead of because you know what? It's very similar to how cars are, honestly. Automatic drive is a thing because people didn't want to learn how to drive a manual transmission, and mechanics are a thing because people didn't want to maintain their own cars, right? I want to get in the car, turn the key, step on the gas, and that's it. It is the thing that gets me from here to there, and that's the level of involvement, to include myself. I'm slightly more involved in a vehicle than that, but not a whole lot, right? And so those people just want an easy button. If that button continues to exist and it goes out to the cloud and whatever, they're also, that segment of the population is also buys into the idea that I've got nothing to hide, or it's good for the government to restrict these things because we wouldn't want people to do bad things, right?
So here's the part where I don't really know what I'm trying. I guess here's what I struggle with. What I struggle with is it will eliminate it for the people, like you say, the easy button people. It doesn't eliminate it for the tinkers. I'm concerned that may remove the tinker's ability to get access to printers that cater to them. Do you think that's a legitimate concern?
I think that there would be a constriction in the market, but I think that the market grew up around tinkerers to begin with, and I think that if you look at just the modding community in general, you're not going to keep those people out. That's just not going to happen. Every console that's been unhackable has had some sort of workaround, right? From, hey, let's get this specially, like not even special disk, but turns out that you can jailbreak many of these machines by popping a root console in the box, by loading a save file in a specific game, just because they didn't sanitize the input properly. So that has happened for the reason why Xbox Media Center was a thing was because turns out somebody broke through the Xbox and then decided to want to put something else on it other than whatever Microsoft had on it at the time. So I don't think you're going to stop those people, especially when you can take this and pull it apart. They're like, what's to say that, okay, you sell a cohesive product, you ship it to them, they buy it, and then they immediately take out the control board and put their own in. And then what did you do for yourself?
Yeah, that's
right?
That is the $1 million thing, right? Like, to a degree, these things are not that hard to build. The only thing that I think is kind of frustrating is it seems like it is going to accelerate the easy button in the 3D printing world, right? Like, Bamboo Labs has essentially, you download the mobile app, you pick the design you want off of their store, and you click print, and then it shows up. And a lot of people see that as 3D printing. What do you, as a person who doesn't do it that way, what do you think about that?
I think it's just fine. I think that if I had to craft a text document with the love and care of things, I probably wouldn't print things. And because I can just hit Control P and have it magically show up via cups and whatever other magic happens in the background and it prints, I'm perfectly fine with that.
Wait a second. Oh, interesting. I guess I wasn't aware. So you don't write PCL by hand, huh?
Nope.
No wonder I don't
Can't
have
say that I do.
No wonder I don't have any spare time. I've been doing it wrong all these years. There's things that software that just does that for you nowadays, huh?
I mean, you'd think as a person who has interviewed people who specifically have done printing their entire lives, you would have learned a better way by now.
I would think so. I guess I just didn't really, I never really thought of it. I just got started that way. And anyway, hey, you know what? If you live in New York, this affects you and you should probably do something about it. If not, I would say we as a technical community have a certain level of responsibility to follow this stuff, to pay attention to this stuff, to know how this stuff works, and to help guide those who are in positions of decision-making power to say, here's what makes some sense. Here's what doesn't make some sense. Choose wisely. Music in your ears means we're out of time. I thank you for joining us. We record the show every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Central. You can learn more by going to AskNoahShow.com while you're there. Click on the podcasts. You'll find that we published every episode back to episode uno. We're back next week, 6 p.m. Central, AskNoahShow.com.